Well, I was reading Isaac Asimov and Ray Bradbury, and I wish I could think of some of the others. When they were writing for 2 and 3 cents a word for amazing stories and planet stories and thrilling wonder for the pulp magazines, and all of these guys started writing. Most of them started writing for these magazines back then. So
The Galactic Empire is falling. It starts when the Empire is at the very peak of its power, but it's going to fall to nothing. One man has a plan to prevent a period of darkness, a period of barbarism, not prevent it, but shorten it from 30,000 years to 1,000.
He's like combined psychology and history into this science called psychohistory, and he basically is able to make fairly accurate predictions about the future based on current events, and he predicts the fall of the empire. And not just the fall of the empire, but I think he predicts the fall of the empire for like 3,000 years. He's saying that the empire is going to fall into what would be our equivalent of the Dark Ages.
And if you know history, especially Roman and then post-Roman history, the foundation is the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of a barbarian power until it becomes the dominant power.
He's trying to provide a warning, and in doing so, he becomes part of that stereotyped scientific alarmist, like Superman's dad, Jor-El, or like Galileo was in our world. He's saying that the Earth travels around the sun; it's not the other way around, and he's almost killed for that belief. But it turns out he was correct, and so is Harry Seldon. He's correct also. But in the novel, he's banished. And so he goes to the planet Terminus, and he and the other psychohistorians are allowed to continue their work, but they're banished because the empire, the political leaders of the empire don't want that word to get out.
That is a history of the fall of Rome as an adventure series. And the amazing thing is, it's a total adventure when the entire structure is nothing but conversations. There's very little action. It's these conversations and the ideas of masses of people and masses of motion through thousands of years of history. It's fascinating. And it's, in a way, it's underwritten. It allows your imagination to go further.
Actually, what kept me reading it was a concept of the hyper jump. They spoke of it in about the first, to me, the first 5 chapters were hard to read. It was a lot of background on your science, and they kept talking about the hyper jump. Okay, getting across space, and once you start to deal with how far the stars are actually away and how are you going to get there, if light travels, it takes light this many years to travel at the speed of light. That's a long distance, so you're dealing with a speed that has to be faster than light speed to get you there. And it touched on something that Lingle said in A Wrinkle in Time, when they got to folding space. If you've read Dune or A Wrinkle in Time, they talk about folding space, which gets into a lot of astrophysics. That sparked my interest and my curiosity, and that's what kept me reading it. So the science in it was quantum physics and the theories behind that.
Almost all of us want something new, to do something new and go someplace new. One of the most popular books in American history is called On the Road by Jack Kerouac. We all want to see something we've never seen before. We have great feelings of nostalgia for the places we grew up and the things we did. In general, there are always exceptions. But also, generally speaking, I want to see the mountain I haven't seen before. My hobby is bird watching. I want to see the bird I've never seen before. I want to talk to people I've never met before. I want to see sights I've never seen before.
I always liked the science fiction more than science fiction. So I always preferred the fiction version of the science rather than looking for, oh wow, this is based on scientific fact. I really didn't care. Suspend disbelief. I'll believe anything if the story is good and the characters are good.
Interestingly enough, when Asimov wrote it, he was also writing the Robot Chronicles, which ultimately, towards the end of his life, they all ultimately came together into one big storyline.
Technology is one of mankind's greatest assets. For the most part, science fiction is merely other genres with a technology made more spectacular and otherworldly.
Actually, space opera is a Western story. It could be a Western, it could be a war story, it could be a pirate picture, it could be a sword and sandal epic. It's really the same plot, just set in a different time. And I just think that it's more familiar and just more easily assimilated. You really don't have to think about space opera. As I say, it's a Western set in outer space. Who was it? There was one that Harlan Ellison described as, Battlestar Ponderosa. When somebody asked him about I think it was Battlestar Galactica, and I think it was Harlan Ellison who said, oh yeah, Battlestar Ponderosa, because that was actually the Ponderosa set in space.
But one piece of tech that has been exploited in ways no others can be is the concept of robotics.
Finally, a robot to stop ladies from squeezing Charmin. Don't squeeze Charmin. Don't squeeze Charmin.
I think in some aspects the robot, it just simply represents technology like run amok. Just a more refined version of that. Whether you're talking about social networking websites, whether you're talking about actual robotics, but it's really just the fear of technology and what impact it will have on society.
For example, you take the movie Westworld. Here is the whole concept of the movie was Westworld was like where you could live out your futuristic fantasies now, and it was an amusement park that was inhabited or run by real robots who looked lifelike. And what happens is there is a computer glitch that causes the robots to go berserk. And so the Westworld, which was the future where a guy could go, like a plumber could go and live out his fantasy as a Western gunslinger, there's this glitch, and Yul Brynner, the robot gunslinger in Westworld, goes berserk and starts killing the human beings who are there. And the whole movie is how he kills James Brolin and then spends the rest of the movie chasing around the other, just average guy from the street, Richard Benjamin, trying to kill. But the fact that it was a computer glitch, then, and we all know what computer glitches do even now, what they can do with banking and prices and your identity, etc., etc., etc. So that was kind of like something that I think is very, very relevant.
So we use Blade Runner in humanities, and so in Blade Runner there are, they're not robots in the sense of like they're made out of metal kind of robots, but they're emotionless, they're void of emotion. And I think that, in that movie we explore really what it means to be human.
Robots aren't always evil. Starting with Asimov's robotic principles and concept of the positronic brain, the robot has more and more been becoming a personal character, and probably the most famous example of this is Star Trek's Data.
You see, Mr. Spock actually had emotions. He just wasn't, it was against his culture to show the emotions, and so he had to adopt the idea of suppressing his emotions, but Captain Kirk was exactly the opposite of that. He was totally the id. If you looked at it from that standpoint, Spock was totally super ego. Captain Kirk was the id with the capability of relating to the super ego, which brings you to the ego. And they formed one of the greatest friendships on board the Enterprise. When that series ended, Roddenberry wanted to keep that analytical aspect in the storyline, so he created Data.
Data's everyman. The character of Data is an android. but Data is the perfect innocent. When we first meet him in Star Trek The Next Generation, he is very knowledgeable. He has a lot of book learning, but he's inexperienced in life. And part of his program is curiosity. He wants to know what it's like.
Data was incapable of having the emotions, and therefore it made him a totally logical being. And it was a matter of, do you trust all the logic, or do you have to have some of the irrationality of human existence in there as well?
The character of Will Riker in the series calls Data Pinocchio, the wooden puppet who wants to be a boy. Data's the android who wants to be human. As a plot device, he's perfect. Data just has to go, Captain, I don't understand. And we explain the story to the innocent.
Data said it once, he could not understand how it was that humans who feel and have that irrational side don't see the simplicities of life, respecting one another, getting along with one another. There's always that irrational, I want more than you, I have to have more than you, and I'm paraphrasing, and so I'm out to conquer and gather more. When I have all that I need, why do I need more? Data could never understand or get past that, and he never understood why it was that humans set out to hurt each other, or other beings, not just humans, set out to hurt and take over other beings for the sake of conquering.
He's fascinating. Data has the adventure we want to have. Data has the innocence a lot of us wish we had back. That he can experience things for the first time as an adult. He can download an entire book, but every now and then Data reads it to have the experience of reading. I've read The Lord of the Rings probably 50 times, and I wish I'd never read it, so I could read it again for the first time. Data is that person who can always experience something the first time.
I think that there is going to come a time when robots are going to be able to develop humanoid characteristics, or be able to operate or answer things that have a dash of human emotion or imagination in them, as opposed to just what is pre-programmed. I think that the day is going to come where they're going to use the pre-programmed information plus an absorption of reality, where they're going to be able to combine the two, and you're going to have human type robots.